This is episode 451 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, we are here Tuesday, a week out from Election Day. Have you voted yet?
I have not. This week is the week. So
Okay. You're not one of those old-timey, I got to vote on Election Day guys?
I am not as much as YouTube do not take us off as much as I am concerned about the vote counting process. You know, in New Mexico, given that they use the same machines on voting day as before, and go in, I'm not afraid to put it in there. So I have other concerns about the system, and it's one of those things that I think that really needs to be addressed because voter integrity is hugely important. But yeah, I'll vote this week.
All right. Well, I voted on Friday, and process went smoothly, although I forgot my readers and had a spoiled ballot at one point. It was okay.
You need longer arms. You need longer arms to read, and those things are small print too.
There's some very small print there, yeah. And of course, I knew the ballot frontward and backwards, literally, but I just marked in a bubble that wasn't the right bubble. So everything went smoothly, though, and assuming all goes well, my vote has been counted along with everybody else's. And another round of polls is out. Actually, there's more polls than we, quite frankly, have time to talk about. But we always have to talk about the ABQ Journal poll. Brian Sanderoff, long considered the gold standard of New Mexico polling. And he's going to have an opportunity to prove his mettle in this election because there's some polls that I think highlight a very different kind of perspective on what is going on in New Mexico. But let's start off with Sanderoff and the ABQ Journal. 8-point lead for Michelle Lujan Grisham, 50-42.
Not landslide territory, but if that comes through, and there's some undecideds, a few in there, it could be quite a large victory for Lujan Grisham if Sanderoff is right. And as you said, he's been the gold standard, but there's a lot of polls going the other way. So if he turns out that he's wrong, that will be a significant tarnish on his record.
Yeah, I mean, wrong would be, of course, completely missing the race and Ron Ketty winning. That was the Trafalgar poll that had Ron Ketty up a point. Another poll from Emerson College, I believe, has what I believe. This is my crystal ball, says that this is the most accurate poll as we head into the final week of the governor's race. Michelle Lujan Grisham at 49, Ron Ketty at 46. And then you've got, obviously, 5 points. Well, I don't know how they get 5. There's probably some rounding going on there.
Right, exactly.
But, basically, though, 49-46, which I believe is pretty accurate based on my own personal understanding of the race and where things stand. We'll see.
Yeah, and I know in the list of topics coming up, what voters are concerned about, I won't steal a lot of the thunder there, but the key is that how do the voters translate what they are concerned about into which candidate is most likely to successfully, positively impact those issues?
Yeah. Now, that Emerson poll has. This is really, I think this is going to be the interesting one from a Sanderoff perspective, is Emerson has Herrell up in CD2 by 10 points nearly. Depending on how you parse the data, she's got 54 to 44% support when you include undecided voters, which asking them which candidate they were leaning toward at the time, which obviously you got to vote for somebody if you're going to vote. And if you're going to vote, even if you're undecided, that is a substantial margin for Herrell. Now, I don't believe it's quite that far in Herrell's favor. I think Yvette Herrell personally, and we'll get into these, but I think she's she's on track to possibly win, but it's going to be a nail biter and maybe not even decided on election night. However, Sanderoff in his poll has Gabriel Vasquez up 47-45 with 8% undecided. So plenty of those undecided voters out there come election day that are probably going to make up their mind. And, so we got Emerson with Yvette up 10 and Sanderoff with Yvette losing by 2. So that's a real difference right there. Before we conclude with these polls, Sanderoff, first congressional district. Remember, these are all new districts, so I'm sure that
we
changes
don't
things.
know.
But so when you look at the performance data used to redistrict these seats, the most Democrat leaning was the Stansbury CD1 seat that covers most of Albuquerque with a 10-point advantage for the Democrat. This poll has Stansbury up 48-42 with 9% undecided. So still at least a reasonable shot at things for Michelle Garcia Holmes. Interestingly enough, the 3rd district, which got redistricted significantly and made more Republican, only 1 point difference from the 2nd seat. I believe the Herrell seat is a 4-point performer for Democrats. The 3rd seat is a 5-point performer. But as Sanderoff sees it, Leger Fernandez is going to win this in a walk, 53-35 with 10% undecided.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, nothing is set in stone. There's only one poll that matters at this point. But I would say, based on those, some surprising data, and then you take the Emerson poll and dump that into the mix, and we're going to have a true test for Mr. Sanderoff on this election day and see if he's right about some of these. So we'll come in, and just a few minutes from now, you and I will have our own conversations, but this is going to be real interesting. Just the polling industry, you know it, we know it, it's been talked about a lot in the media. That industry has struggled to keep up with changing approaches for people, different technologies, and their unwillingness often to engage with pollsters, partially because of kind of the social stigma of voting for one party or the other.
Yeah, and then, there's 3, the way I break it down, there's, not a great scientific approach, but, what percentage of R's, D's, and independents are declined to state in New Mexico? We can't have it. We have to overcomplicate it. But what percentage do you do? And picking those depends on what the enthusiasm of those particular groups are, and that can change from election to election. And then who answers the phone? Some people won't answer, and so you could miss huge groups because they're like, no, I'm not talking to a pollster. And if they do talk to you, do they tell you the truth, Paul? And, there's been a lot of evidence that over the years, as you said, issues that are particularly controversial, people will just lie. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to vote for this candidate.
Yeah, so don't miss out. Be like Wally and vote this week if you haven't voted already, or if you're one of those stalwart election day people, make sure you have plenty of time because you just never know. It's one of the reasons I always vote early because you just don't know what those lines could look like. And in the past, I think it was the mayoral election this last time around, we had some pretty long lines at the polls, and you just want to make sure that your vote gets in there. And yeah, I mean, whatever your concerns may be about voter integrity, that's an issue to discuss after the election, not not going out to the polls. You got to go out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul, and it's one of those, I think integrity of elections ought to be an issue for both parties, but the time to address that is not, as you said, is not the week before. It's like you test the systems, you come up with the approaches to make sure things are fair and straightforward in the political off season.
Exactly. All right. Well, we are going to pick some candidates here based on our hopes and assumptions, mostly assumptions and expertise in terms of our own reading of the tea leaves. And we're going to start with the race. In the races for New Mexico here, I want to do both winner and percentage point difference. So, of course, Ronchetti versus Michelle Lujan Grisham for governor. I'll give you the first shot at this one. We'll alternate.
Yeah, Ronchetti 50.01.
Oh,
and if there's no third-party candidate, I don't believe. No, I mean, we ignore those. Sometimes there's a write-in candidate, but, I'm going to go out on a limb. And is that, Paul, if I had my financial fortune to bet on that race, I might bet the other way. But I'm going with I think he has a shot. He's run a good campaign. He's working it hard, and I think the polls have some people not necessarily telling the truth. So he barely squeaks it out.
all right. Well, so we're talking 50.1 to
0.01. I mean, just like
all right,
50% in one vote, maybe.
So we're talking Wally's vote
barely
puts Ronchetti over the top.
So your vote will count. Everyone who listened to this podcast, your vote will count in my world. So
all right. Well, I'm going to be a pessimist, and I'm going to say Michelle Lujan Grisham pulls it out by 1 percentage point. So we have a pretty stark difference to start out with. I'm going to. And next one, I'm going to say Yvette Herrell does win re-election to Congress, and she does
over Gabe Vasquez.
Over Gabe Vasquez. And my reasoning is as follows: I believe that Yvette Herrell has outworked him, and I think that if the Democrats had taken a more moderate Democrat rather than somebody who's kind of drinking the hard left progressive Kool-Aid. If they'd rerun Xochitl Torres Small, for example, I think she might she would have a really good chance against Yvette Herrell. But Gabe Vasquez is just far to the left, and I'm going to give Yvette 52-48.
Yeah, I will. I will go with that 52-48. And as you say, Gabe Vasquez could win in Nancy Pelosi's district, or somewhere around Berkeley or Austin. But he has taken. He was very, shall we say, verbose in advocating policies that, with hindsight, didn't turn out to look too good, like defund the police to begin with, and many others. And we will see if the Democrat strategy to get Herrell out worked in terms of redistricting. But yeah, I do think because she has worked hard and he is not the best candidate they could have run, she will win by a few points.
All right, so we're going to kind of agree on the Herrell race. Now going national, and we'll just do who's going to win. Dr. Oz versus John Fetterman. One of the most interesting races, of course, for U.S. Senate up there in Pennsylvania. Control of the U.S. Senate is incredibly important for all kinds of reasons. Of course, Supreme Court justices that process involves the U.S. Senate. I firmly believe that the Republicans will take over. It'll maybe be 52-48 after the thing all is said and done. But I'm going to say that Dr. Oz pulls it out against Fetterman. We're not going to predict on the points, but just I think he will win.
Yeah, Mr. Fetterman, God bless the poor man. He is struggling. It's one of those. He's had health issues. He has to have questions. He has to read them because he's having a hard time translating language when he hears it. And, that is not a good place to start out from. Early on, Dr. Oz's campaign ran into a lot of trouble, but he stuck with it. And, I'm going to agree that that the Dr. Oz comes through and squeaks that one out.
All right. Kari Lake. This is governor of Arizona, the more prosperous, better run, school choice oriented state to our west, much more conservative, but having moved closer to purple, but still Republican controlled, at least in the state government context. Mark Kelly versus the guy's name escapes me, but there's a Senate race there as well. And Carrie Lake, very interesting lady, former TV host. And I'll go with you get the first dibs on this one.
Yeah, I think Carrie Lake will win this going away. She's a far superior candidate. Katie Hobbs, her opponent, has not run a good campaign, and often, to me, in the things I've seen, looks like a deer in the headlights. The thing that I think, I think it's a net positive that Carrie Lake is a plain-spoken voice of conservatism. The national media has kind of started to take their Trump derangement syndrome and transfer it, what I call Trump transfer derangement syndrome, to Carrie Lake, because she has a style-wise and her propensity to not back down and not take the premise that reporters ask her questions and say what she wants to say. And she's run a very, very strong campaign. I think she's going to win probably pretty handily.
Yeah. Well, and the last one is, sorry. I agree.
Okay.
Lake will win that. And I think it won't be especially close. So good for Arizona. Now, Whitmer versus what is that woman?
Tudor Dixon.
Tudor Dixon, yes. Gretchen Whitmer, I think, is most known. This is governor of Michigan. She was right up there with Michelle Lujan Grisham as being one of the most pro-lockdown governors in the entire country. This one, though, had previously been seen as a pretty safe seat for Whitmer. I don't know. Michigan is a moderate state. It's, Midwestern. It's probably left of Ohio in general terms, in terms of Republican versus Democrat. But Tudor Dixon is, somebody who is an upstart here politically. And I don't know. I think it's going to be a very close race, but I'm going to go with Tudor Dixon on this one. She's going to come from behind, and it's going to be a good year for Republicans. I think that's safe to say. So I will say sayonara to Whitmer, and Tudor Dixon going to win the governorship of Michigan.
Yeah, and Paul, in a lot of ways, when we were in the COVID period, I think the fact that Michigan is closer to the bright lights of New York City and other media, she became a national spokesperson doing very, very similar policies to Michelle Lujan Grisham.
Yep.
But Michigan is not like New Mexico. They have to, they don't get the government just dumping money in left, right from Washington, as well as having oil and gas revenues come in. So they need a business climate. And while New Mexico was hurt tremendously bad, Michigan really recognized it because they have more businesses more important to them. So until real recently, I had Whitmer winning, and it's going to be close. But I will say just because I think with the idea that the Republicans are gaining momentum up until election, that maybe Tudor Dixon can squeak that one out. But that would be a huge upset if that were to happen.
It would indeed, and a lot of the polls that I'm seeing were, 50-39 just a few months ago. Even recent polls show 51-43. So
yeah.
This would be a far bigger upset, quite frankly, than
what's a presidential election? Dewey wins. You know what I mean? That it would be.
But we'll see. I mean, don't let our analysis and picks affect your decision. Like I said, the only thing that matters is people getting out to vote. And so we're united, though, that Oz, Lake, and Dixon will win. The only discrepancy we have is between MLG and Ronchetti winning here in New Mexico. Both of us agree that Herrell will win. And I hope you are right in terms of the governor's race. That's all I can say. So, all right, well, we will revisit these after the election. I've got them all written down and kept in our handy dandy scorecard. So we'll see what goes on. But Wally, a little more policy driven discussion and analysis. I am going to move towards some further discussion of the NAEP scores that came out. That I think was an earthquake that, quite frankly, should put Ron Ketty over the top against Michelle Lujan Grisham because New Mexico scored so poorly. And, I'm just waiting for the citizens of New Mexico to hold their political establishment culpable for the horrendous management of the education system. And, that's been a long time coming, but the NAEP scores in particular, where New Mexico was at the very bottom of all measured statistics, 4th grade math, 4th grade reading, 8th grade math, 8th grade reading, and we were not 50th, we were 51st, technically 52nd, because they measured DOD schools. So the Defense Department, those schools blow everybody else out of the water. But anyway, so I did a little bit of analysis because there's been some talk in the media about, well, if you go through the states and you look at which ones locked down and locked their kids out versus which ones did not, there's really no difference. And I'm going to just contribute what I have here. So I looked at states through the prism of those that lost the most performance in 4th grade math in this. So there's 5 states that saw double-digit losses. Those were Delaware, Maryland, New Mexico, New York, and Virginia. Those states, on average, lost school time that was 9.4. So I took their ranking on how much time they were out of school and averaged it, and among those 5, and they, on average, were 9.4 in terms of the rank in lost school time. Maryland was the 3rd most, New Mexico 6th, New York 18th, Virginia 7th, and Delaware 13th. And then the states that had the best performance because I think in this case, you're going to see the most difference at the top and bottom ends of the performance scale. So the states that lost the least performance were Wisconsin, Iowa, Hawaii, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Those states lost either 1 or 2 points. Everybody lost ground in math, and math was more negatively impacted than reading. Those states, in terms of lost school time, were ranked 28.8. So I would say that's a significant correlation. Not saying that I've proven anything here, but the states that lost the less time in the classroom, lost the least points on the NAEP,
did better.
Hawaii is the wild card here. And I sent these results to my friend in Hawaii who runs the state think tank out there, who, it's really interesting because
to see if he knew of anything that might account for that, because Hawaii, they were locked down. Were they probably the most locked down, Paul? If not,
they were among the very most locked down. And this, we're talking, of course, about time lost in school.
Right.
There's other forms of lockdown that matter. But real quickly on the reading component, and reading would be impacted heavily, but you're sitting down with your kid, figuring out math problems. Not every parent's equipped for that. Not that everybody can do reading, but reading is a somewhat simpler skill in a lot of ways, and there's just more of a prevalence of reading. You can easily live a year of your life without doing serious math. So anyway, there are states that gained on the NAEP score during COVID. Those states that increased reading scores were Alabama, Hawaii, and Louisiana. You cannot, Alabama and Louisiana, 2 deep South red states, but Hawaii, again. And then we looked at the lowest performing states, and so we compared, and again, the states that lost more time also lost more scores. The states that lost less time also lost fewer points on the NAEP. So this is not conclusive analysis, but I think if you're going to see impacts, is going to be on the outer ends of the scale, with the exception, again, of Hawaii. Hawaii, for some reason, lost a lot of time in the classroom, and yet their kids did very, very well during the pandemic. And I think if I was in the Hawaii think tank head's shoes, I would really be interested in that analysis, because, or if we ever go through a lockdown again, what did Hawaii do to make those results much better than most states?
Yeah, and the Hawaii lockdowns, I know they kept people who didn't live in Hawaii. What I was wondering is, Hawaii's a nice place. The weather's nice. Were we just sitting outside under the umbrella reading books at every age level? You know what? It is a very interesting question. The key is based on the numbers, we were not doing that here in New Mexico.
Well, and not to toot our own horn here, but we predicted throughout the pandemic that New Mexico was going to suffer among the very most of all the states, because we have families that may not have the educational attainment in order to keep their kids on the straight and narrow. We may have, we do have a relatively poor broadband deployment, and I don't know, Hawaii. If you ever go there, you've been to Hawaii there, Wally?
Yeah, 3 times. It's a really nice place.
So, Hawaii, obviously, islands, and you have generally a development pattern where people are along the coast, not just because they like water, but because the interior tends to be very mountainous and very deeply forested. So I would think that broadband deployment might be a very easy thing to do in a lot of parts of Hawaii.
And, it's very small, the place I've been to is Maui, so I know a bit about it. And, on one side of the island's where all the population is, and on the other side, there's very few people who live there. So, much like it's not, considerably harder, frankly, than Albuquerque. We can serve a lot of like cell phones with a few towers on the Sandias and a couple of the other places. I think you could do a lot of wireless broadband deployment on Maui with not a whole lot of effort.
Yeah. So anyway, it's it's a fascinating analysis, but there was no question that for a variety of reasons, New Mexico students were going to suffer. We predicted it at the time. And, while you get caught up in these national conversations about what impact the lockdowns had or didn't have on student performance, there was never a doubt that New Mexico students were going to be among the most impacted by those lockdowns. And that has been borne out through these NAEP scores. And again, voters need to hold the politicians accountable. And in this case, it's one politician. Now, we could talk about the entire education system and reforms that need to be made, and that, because we weren't exactly in first place before COVID, but Governor Lujan Grisham bears full responsibility for what happened to New Mexico students during COVID, and that there's no doubt about that, and something that she needs to face the consequences of.
Yeah, and Paul, I think this issue is likely to gain traction. The traction will accelerate regardless of who's governor. It's getting from disappointing to downright disgusting and embarrassing our education performance as a state. And it stands out so dramatically that I believe there will be political pressure for something to happen.
Yeah. So we worked together, Wally, on a project here, a very unique project, using new technology. We worked with ProView Networks here, a local company, a media company, and we used something called ProView Story File, in which, and this could be done for any individual, and it has been done, but specifically, the idea was to allow the public to engage in a specific way with, in this case, Republican Attorney General candidate Jeremy Gay, where rather than him as he did coming on our podcast and sitting down and hearing me and asking questions and having that conversation. Average people can use this story file technology to ask questions of the candidate. They are sitting in front of you on a screen, answering those questions as you, if you have voice-enabled technology like you do on your cell phone or a lot of laptops, you can just ask them a bunch of questions about what they believe in,
or type them in if you
or
prefer
type
to
them,
type.
yeah.
And then there's you can or look up some pre-packaged question, but it is a very interesting technology.
Yeah, so it's available at arrowsoфenchantment.com and riograndefoundation.org. This technology, I think, is really the next generation. It's very cool that Rio Grande Foundation was allowed, had the opportunity to get in early. It's not something that, we did offer this to some other candidates. I don't know how many chances or when we'll have chances to engage with the technology again. It doesn't have to be used just for political candidates. I think, from talking to people involved with it, I know that they're working with Holocaust survivors to have them sit down and use basically they answer a bunch of questions about their experiences that are relevant to what people would ask them. And then that's how the technology works using artificial intelligence and whatever. I was thinking that World War II veterans and others might be worth doing this for as well. I think Gary Johnson's got one as well to make New Mexico another center of this particular technology. So again, folks can go to Arrows of Enchantment or riograndefoundation.org and engage with it themselves. Just click on Jeremy Gay's picture or some of the links and look through it.
Yeah, and I just want to say that, the effort required of the person who is the subject of this, in this case, the political candidate for Attorney General, Jeremy Gay, there is a commitment. There is a lot of questions. The questions have to be broad-ranging. This is not a good technology for a political candidate who wants to sit in their basement, not do debates, not answer questions. It's one of those, in fact, quite the opposite. You have to be really committed to make this work. But yeah, I thought it very, very interesting project, and I thought it turned out very well.
All right. Now, Wally, I think you and I spend a lot of time talking about, the environment within a context of a lot of the other issues. Certainly, we critique and criticize the environmental movement, and we're going to do that again, but we're going to do that in the sense that there is a massive environmental success story out there that involves, generally speaking, more freedom, more choice on behalf of individuals and their employers. And it's something that, quite frankly, has positive impacts beyond the scope of really almost any other environmental regulation or plan, but it gets almost or zero attention from the environmental movement. And I'm specifically talking about one of the few silver linings of COVID, and that is telework or telecommuting. It's something that has grown massively in popularity, and it's got massive environmental benefits. And I'll run through some of the data, but before we do that, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about it. I mean, you work out of your home, which is another type. It's a type of, you're not telecommuting anywhere. You are just running your own business out of your home. But you've certainly worked for businesses before. Just talk about how that's good for you and good for the environment.
Yeah, well, a couple of things, Paul. I was a Zoom power user before COVID.
Ooh, you used Zoom before. It was cool.
Yeah, well, and I've had a Zoom account for a long time. And so, the key is I saw the potential, and for certain kinds of projects, I saw that how much more valuable and more efficient and actually effective it was for certain types of things. Don't get me wrong, Paul. There are certain types of meetings that are so much better in person. But for a lot of stuff, working on technology things where you're working on plans or designs of a product or a website or whatever, sometimes Zoom works better. You both have your own screen. And then just a little bit to follow on. Yeah, there's not really any political credit for Zoom or Microsoft Teams, or there's a whole host of other products out there. But when you look at the impact, what I've seen, I believe you have some statistics to back that up. It's like, what would be worse for the environment, getting rid of every bus system in the country, or getting rid of Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all those, and everybody having to go back to an office every day to do their job?
Now, just to put some data out here, the Census Bureau came out with a report recently which found that in New Mexico specifically, and you could go to the website itself at Heirs of Enchantment, New Mexico saw a 10.1 percentage point jump in telework from 2019 to 2021. That is 5.1% of people teleworked in New Mexico in 2019. 2021 saw 15.2%. So that really is a tripling, if you will, of the number of people. Now, real quickly, 28% of all greenhouse gas emissions, the most of any sector, are from the transportation sector. Now, that's obviously slightly more than a quarter. Now, you're not going to eliminate that, and transportation involves, diesel trucks and heavy equipment moving. But you think of sitting in a commute now in a commute in a major metro area. And, us folks in Albuquerque tend to be a bit spoiled because Albuquerque is in many ways a major city, and in many ways it is a small city, and the commute coming from, as I did, Washington, D.C., is relatively painless, almost without question. There's very few problems on a day-to-day basis, and it's nothing compared to Washington, D.C. or New York or L.A. or whatever. So the impact of telecommuting may not be quite as readily apparent here, but imagine just in your mind all those cars sitting in traffic, emitting CO2 and other chemicals into the air as they idle on a freeway in gridlock. To the extent that telecommuting makes that less of a problem, it is a huge boon for the environment. And not only that, but you have the need for fewer roads, fewer expansions of those roads in terms of lanes. So you're talking about saving tax dollars that way as well. It's
and in addition to the gasoline or diesel fuel that's saved, tires and brakes are two of the major sources of particulate pollution in places with a lot of automobiles. You don't need those, and as you say, don't need as much asphalt. The roads don't wear out. There's a lot to be said for that.
And one of the things that I specifically like to compare here now, this is from Wendell Cox again, analyzing the census data again at Heirs of Enchantment. Driving alone, 67.8% of people, that's how they get to work. Carpool is 7.8%. So you're talking 75% in some form or another drive to work. Working from home is 18%, 17.9% technically of people. So those are people who are productive members of society every single day, paying taxes, and by and large, not having any negative externalities from what they are doing work-wise. Now, mass transit, 2.5%. Think of all the money we are pouring into the rail run. This is in New Mexico, let alone the Washington, D.C. subway system or New York subway or other systems. And I'm not saying that all of these should go the way of the dodo bird or the Edsel, but if you allocated even a tiny fraction right here in New Mexico of those resources that we've spent, $1 billion+ on the rail runner to slightly incentivize. And again, I'm not saying we should do this, but the benefits of marginally incentivizing working from home would be a much better use of those dollars than spending money on wasteful and unnecessary buses and rail runners. And there's a lot of externalities about those items and whether they actually save energy, especially those buses driving around empty, and what they're achieving. Just food for thought, and something that I think is, if the environmental movement cared about the environment as opposed to sucking in tax dollars and hectoring people to do certain things. And I'll say one other thing. We have a family friend who worked at Sandia National Lab. And once upon a time, Sandia National Lab was the job to get in Albuquerque. There was no better job to have. You just got in and you worked your way as high as you could go during your career. That's all fine and dandy. Those are great paying jobs with great benefits. This individual, though, now remotely works telecommuting for a tech firm out of California that she can make more money than she worked at Sandia, working out of her home. And it offers great opportunities for certain workers who may not have the job opportunity that they wish for, whether it's in Albuquerque or somewhere else, that they can access those job opportunities using this technology. So just something that we've kind of come to accept after COVID, but we don't hear reported and discussed nearly as much as I think it's impacted people's lives in mostly positive ways.
Yeah, and then Paul, in addition, I'm seeing changes brought about by this telecommuting thing with regard to trade shows and conferences. It used to be you would have to go to do that, and now whether it's a board meeting for a statewide organization in New Mexico or a trade show or whatever, a lot of times there is the cyber way to attend, and based on the fact that. I think it's something I saw. It's like something like the equivalent of 40 to 50 miles per gallon for a person to ride an airplane. Obviously, the airplane is using, a gallon a second or something like that. But the key is that, if we're going to fly to Washington, D.C. from New Mexico versus attend something online, that is a very, very big savings. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on. And you are right. I have not. Nobody talks about this. So,
yeah, it's just something that is really left unsaid, considering the profound impacts it's had. I agree with you. And there's certain meetings that you really want to be there in person. There's others, like maybe a board meeting for some organization where you want to balance things out. You want to be able to get to know and meet people who are involved. But if you're just conducting business and doing what you need to do on a quarterly or every once in a while basis, it makes a lot more sense, and is especially in a big state where you want to have geographical diversity in your representation here in New Mexico. But asking people on the board of an organization that's statewide in nature to travel to Albuquerque on a regular basis, it's not always in the cards. Real quick, there was a story that we wrote about at Airs of Enchantment that made some some waves locally here with regard to Mayor Keller dramatically increasing the amount of unclassified workers. And this is from a city audit where the city and Keller administration has expanded this political appointee system from 314 back in 2015 to 620. Just massive shifts. They're not even coming up with job descriptions or minimum requirements. I post this all at airsofenchantment.com. It's incredibly troubling because these political positions, really, at the best of times, they are political in nature, and they're paid for by we, the taxpayers, especially when they're lacking job descriptions and there's no documented justification of change job responsibilities if they moved from one part of the city government to another. It's a real problem, and it's something that I hope the city council will really hold this mayor accountable for, especially at a time when we have all these police positions unfilled, and the mayor's out expanding his own, his own kingdom, if you will, without doing the basics of government.
Yeah, and Paul, a number of things. The COVID money dump from Washington put a lot of money into states and cities, and so there was a lot of money to be had there. But, that money will not last forever. Oh, yeah, and by the way, it's a huge contributor to inflation. And
Right.
what do we need in Albuquerque? Police. That's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in terms of the priority for city employees. And yeah, that was a pretty that's a pretty big number.
Yeah.
As you say, Albuquerque sometimes is a big city, and sometimes it seems like a really small place. It's not so big that you can add, in the realm of 300 political appointees to the administration of the city and not have that be noticed.
Yeah, and those positions, when they become unclassified, were receiving salary increases between 22 and 368%. So we're talking about a lot of money here, and that is, of course, money that could be allocated to public safety and getting more cops on the streets, and something that, again, the city has a lot of money available to it, but we're not doing the basics of city governance, and this mayor, again, just doesn't seem interested in it. All right, thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube and Rumble channels. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.